John Calloway made a mention of something that you talked about earlier to a confined group. I'd like you to be more specific with all of us now, right now. Why do you not pick on Belushi's death? Why do you pick on Paul Lynde? Why do you pick on Elvis, on Gacy? How did you differentiate between who you're going to satirize? Where did you draw the line?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. What Gary and I both try to do with our radio show is be real. We don't like decide before we go on the air, this is how we're going to be, this is how we're going to handle this. It just sort of evolves.
All right, but do you talk about where we're going to stop? How far is this thing going to go? What's our responsibility?
No.
You don't talk, so you're basically just going out and...
We're just like two guys that we just go on and we say what we think.
All right, then somewhere in your mind, you are drawing the line.
Oh, sure, sure, as everyone should.
But where?
Well, it changes. It, you know, it goes back and forth.
Yeah.
What I said at the luncheon that we were at was that, to me, I can't help it, to me, Paul Lynde's death, it was not, his death wasn't funny, but there was humor in it for me. Just because of the way he was, you know, oh, all right, and all that. He wasn't real to me. He was a one-dimensional character on my 17-inch television screen. So I can't be expected to feel a sense of personal loss because, you know, Hollywood Squares was not my life, you know.
All right.
But then John Belushi, I knew him, I met him, he touched my life, so I felt a sense of loss. The same with Marcus. I think we just become desensitized to death.
There's that word again, desensitized. Do you think the media in general does nothing but desensitize death?
Well, let's...
and John and Gary, please chime in if you...
Well, I mean, you know, let's face it, the news is like the most profitable thing they have going here, other than your show, of course.
No,
and so their job is to go out and, you know, find death and destruction and package it and sell it.
Yes, but how many times have you seen on the news, yes, that death is reported, but also you see the families?
Yeah, screaming and wailing. You know, it's like a TV show.
But the point there is...
Well, it is a TV show, but I mean, it's like a, you know, it's not even real.
Right, but the point there is that they do recognize that there's family, that there is remorse, that there's victims afterward, that something continues on a very personal basis, that death is affected.
It never comes across to me. Well, when we dealt with Marcus's death on the air, we got some incredible letters from people. I mean, just hundreds of incredible letters from people that really were...
Saying what?
Well, the point that I was going to make regarding the letters, we got several thousand. The one that sticks out in my mind right now, because I read all of them, he's still reading the first 50.
I only read a couple hundred.
And the one that really, I guess, stuck in my mind was from this 20-year-old girl, same age as Marcus, who said, before Marcus's death, I never even thought of death. And after he died, I became very scared of death because he was only 20 also. But she said, after I listened to how you treated his death, I didn't feel afraid of death anymore. So I think that's the feeling that we got over to the listener last week after we talked about Marcus's death and what he meant to us.
We've done bits.
And
on his, I mean, you know, talking about him being in heavy, and he was heavy, but certainly, I'm sorry.
What did you feel that you had to do as a result of his death?
Well, we just talked about how we felt, and at some point, we decided, I decided, and Gary felt the same way, that he was in a, you know, a guy like Marcus, who was a totally good person, was in a, you know, I believe in, I don't know what, if you want to call it heaven or whatever, but that he was in a special place, and that I felt him looking down on me. And so we made jokes about that, and him being up in heaven saying, damn, Steve, look at all the press I'm getting and all this, you know, all that other stuff that's happening, you know, surrounding my death. And that made me feel better. And I think at some point you have to shut off. You can't deal with the reality of death too much or you go crazy, because it is too scary.
I want to take a call before we got to break away again. Hi, good morning. You're on AM Chicago with us. We don't have a call? No one wants to talk to Steve or Gary or John? I thought you were more popular than that. All right. There are, I'm sure, people who have said now, boy, I bet you they've learned their lesson. What do you say to them?
We've learned another lesson. I mean, is there only one lesson we have to learn? We've learned another lesson. We always learn lessons. But as I said, I don't regret anything I've done in the past.
John, media in general, let's go back and let's apply what Gary said something about, you know, what he's picked up is how to deal with death. Do you think we deal with death? Do you think when we're reporting those stories, do you think when we're handling situations of war or individual shootings that we think about death in general?
No, we have so much of it, it's very difficult for people to know how to feel about it. And so people prepare themselves with kind of conventional piety, carry a little conventional piety over here and a little bit of personal piety over here. And yet when you've got 6 persons killed in an automobile accident on the Dan Ryan, and 400 persons have died when a ship sinks near the Falkland Islands, and so on and so forth, and you're kind of moving around, and we're kind of to pocket to pocket to pocket to shooting this stuff out at you. We kind of hit you with all kinds of levels of death, and we're all going around. If I want to talk about, this is a book called The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker, and it's a book I want these guys to read someday when they grow up, because they'll love it, because it is a book which is very close to their heart, that talks about the risk-taking that you have to do in life, and the foolishness of life, and the foolishness of a religious belief, and how we all really have a very deep fear of death throughout all of our lives. At the same time, we have a great love of life. And these things that you see in the newspapers and hear on radio and so on and so forth are a kind of subtle fabric of reminder of all of this, and yet we do it in such an objective. 27 persons died today when a plane crashed in Kenosha. That kind of stuff doesn't really, and what these guys finally do is they either stop and make fun of it, or now apparently they're stopping and doing some real grieving, and in a way they kind of mix up the ball game in a way that those of us who do conventional news don't. That is their value, and that sometimes is their tastelessness.
All right, and let's talk about that possible tastelessness and the fact that it does upset some people when we return. And maybe we'll try to get one of your calls. We'll send somebody out to call you.
Somebody call.
Yeah, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Gee whiz.